talking galleries is always something which brings me to think. And if I can sum up my nearly 2 days here, what struck me is the ideas we are in a changing world. Changing world because of the market, because of the digital world, because of the globalization. And I think that everybody here, as a gallery, as a collector, we cannot avoid to ask ourselves a certain number of questions, and especially how we can survive, or adapt, or reinvent ourselves to this new changing world. I think that one of the ways to do it is communication. Communication is becoming more and more important because you have to have your own identity, but also to have people who can perceive your identity, to have people who can hear your voice, because your voice is among a lot of noise. And so how we can to have you, especially mid-sized and small galleries, how can you have a voice in such a noisy world? And you are also fortunate to have with us two, I think, really two modern professionals. They love what they do, and they have a very diverse experience. I will begin with Maria. Maria, she began with the Peggy Guggenheim collection, then she went to the Louvre. She worked with the Louvre, the British Museum, and also she worked with big institutions like Qatar and the Armory Show, and she's working with the Brunswick Group. And Calum, he began with a master, a guru, Sachi. If we speak of communication, communication in art is, we have the god, at least he was a god, perhaps. And then after you've done a lot of things. You took care of Art Basel. You took care of with galleries like Hauser and Weiss. And you also are located in several towns, three places, and you are located, Brunswick is located in 10 countries. So what I've asked them, it's their mission, is to also to adapt a little bit their experience to the audience, and especially to the small and mid-sized gallery. So what I would like to say is that it's impossible in such a small time, to go through all the topics. So it's a kind of menu dégustation today. I've chosen 4 topics, what is important for me is to try to, with these 4 topics, to show you that communication is something very important. It's not just about having a website. It's much more than that. It's having something to say, and to say to people, and to use the right tool to say to the right persons. And so we are going to try to follow this idea. And I think that the first thing that everybody think about communication is now about branding. This became the new word. Everybody is branded in a certain way. Artists are becoming brand. Collectors are perhaps becoming also brands, I don't know. And so I want to try to understand a little bit more what is about this idea of branding, and especially how the idea of branding can be, useful and applied to small galleries. So my first question, honneur aux dames, Maria, would be, what is for you branding?
I think I would define a brand as very simply a clearly articulated identity. And what I mean by that is that any brand essentially has a core set of values. And these come across time and time again in the way and the content it communicates. So somehow they always hark back to these key messages or value, creating what we might call a brand recognition. So really, although I think we shy away from the word brand in the art world because we like to think of our experiences and our products as more bespoke, it really is another way of just saying someone who has a very defined identity.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with Maria and say that the most obvious part of a brand is that visual identity. And so starting with those words or name that form the logo, that form, whether that's Gagosian or smaller galleries, you know, the word itself is how it's presented visually is the signifier that leads on to what the brand stands for. And those, as Maria said, those are some clearly defined key messages or values that when you look at that name or that set of words or that symbol, that you immediately think of those 3, 4, 5 things that brand stands for. Yeah, so that's.
And do you think that small galleries or small entities need to have a brand? Do you think that today it's important for them if they want to survive or to keep, let us say, to keep the light on, if they need to have something like a called brand? Because, you know, the word brand is something which is, you know, people are very, how do we say, you have two kind of opinion about what when you use the word brand. But do you think that everybody here, they need today to have a brand?
Yes, but I don't, you know, I don't really see brands as a bad thing per se. It's just certain brands operate in ways that, you know, that people don't appreciate or respect. So I think the idea that it's possible to operate a business, whether it's in art or in my business, which is communications, or any business without a brand these days is very, very difficult. I mean, having no brand is a brand position these days. So, and that does work, and some galleries, I think, can successfully work with that, you know, the anti-brand brand, but it's still a brand.
What do you think?
I would agree
about
with
the anti-brand brand?
of the anti-brand. I mean, I would agree with that, and I would also say that, you know, we accept a brand as essentially an identity. I do think anyone who's communicating with external audiences, and that doesn't necessarily mean a wide public, but if you're speaking to collector groups or museum professionals, the art sector, you do need to have a defined identity, because there's no way people can remember and recognize you unless it's very clear, actually, what your core story or identity is.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Maria. It's being memorable. I think you summed it up there very well. It's coming away. You know, I was very impressed when I came here yesterday morning. I saw Ed Winkleman, and he is a brand because he's got a blog. He's published a book. You know, he stands out from the crowd. It's fantastic. He gives talks here. So that to me is, you know, he's built an intellectual brand that separates him from the crowd, and you know, he's one of the people I remember most. Not just because he's had his unfortunate accident, and I hope you're better very soon, Ed.
Just a small story. You know from where the word brands come? Brand come from, I shall say, the ancient time when they began to iron the kettles. Brand means to iron a kettle. So branding was to identify. So you see, we haven't invented the word. It comes from a very, very long time. So branding is not something, you know, which was discovered just the day before today. So this is also very important to say that we are using something which has been used for times and times, and it's nothing new under the sun. But I think it's the way it's done, perhaps it's a little bit different today. So what can be different for a small gallery in terms of branding with a big institution? What for you makes the difference of the idea of branding? What shall be the core of the identification for a small gallery in terms of branding compared to the Uber galleries or the Uber institutions?
Well, you work with what you've got and who you are, and your individual story, your individual history, the buildings that you operate from, the artists that you work with, your intellectual background. That, you know, for a big museum, you're working with a huge team of staff, you're working with a much longer history, you're working with vast buildings that have, you know, an architectural profile that's resonates throughout the world. So it's not that you're doing anything particularly different. You're just working on a smaller scale. So you're working with those materials that are to hand, yourself and your artists and your gallery space.
Mm. I think very much the limited resources are a reality, but I wouldn't think a gallery necessarily is competing with the institutions. I mean, they're very complementary and distinct roles, and I think we've heard a lot in the conference about what a key role the galleries plays in the sort of art ecosystem. And, if anything, we can say how you stand out from other galleries of your size. But I think, people will come to the gallery for very different experiences and insight that they go to an institution. So I don't think maybe they're looking for the same things.
Scarcity can mean also creativity, and we'll discuss it with the means of how to create a brand. About a brand, let's speak about the content.
Mm-hmm.
What is for you the content of a brand? What is a part of the visual? But I think nobody's here really have a visual identity in the galleries. I think the idea of creating a kind of logo is not something which is natural for a gallery. So a part of a logo, what is for you the content that should be included in this idea of brand, especially for mid-size and small galleries?
I mean, I guess, from my own experience of operating and growing a small business, that the things that I started with was my business card, and whether you choose to turn your name into a brand itself, it is going on your business card. It is a brand, whether you write it in red and make it swirly, or it's in black and very discreet. It's still your brand, and it's going on your business card, and it's your website is to me, it's the primary tool that is the gateway to the world for every art gallery. It allows, and that is where people will instantly across the world be judging you as to whether they're someone they want to work with, someone they find interesting, exciting, sparks their imagination. And that site there is, as Maria was saying earlier about your values and your messages, that's where you have to put forward very succinctly your approach to the world, why you're different, interesting, what you believe in. It's that should be coming across from your website, and that's how everything. We're all in the visual business. If your website's not particularly visual, there's a real problem, I think. And so for me, that's absolutely where I would be starting in terms of presenting my gallery brand to the world. Is that I disagree with you. I think the name, however you say it, is a brand, and then the website is, for me, the main platform of putting across and making a more nuanced statement of the 3, 4, 5 things you stand for, whether it's the sort of artist that you work with, your intellectual approach, your approach to putting on exhibitions, your approach to art fairs, your approach to working with collectors and building collections, things that make, things that you work on day to day that tell that define who you are. That to me is what you're wanting to try and communicate with that website and through your brand.
Maria?
I think the point of the website is an interesting one because, to some extent we might argue that nothing is a substitute for building the personal relationship, particularly in the, when you look at the job of a gallerist. But I do think in this day and age, people will look at your website as a form of validation. So if you've made a very first positive impression, they will still look you up and see that, what they see online somehow matches that first impression they have. And not just your website, maybe also your digital presence. So if you're active on Twitter or you have a Facebook account, and they will do their research and look at that as well, I think. So I think a key takeaway is really not to neglect that, even if we feel that, to a large extent, much of what we do is about personal relationships and building trust.
But do you think that most of the websites that we see today are adapted with the way people today connect with art? And I will come to what I want. I think that people today connect to art with smartphone, with social network. Do you think that a website should be adapted for smartphone? And do you think that the content should be adapted for the smartphone, for the social networks, especially somebody called it a kind of hybrid, liquid content, which means that you can spread. Do you think that today this is also very important, not only to put a website, but also to think of who is going to use it and how they're going to use it?
I think you've touched on a key point, which is really sort of knowing your audiences and being very mindful of who you're trying to address, be it with your website or any other channels of communication. And I think you need to understand the way they sort of deal or consume information, and be sort of as knowledgeable as you can about the people you're trying to address, because I think that will really inform your approach. I think if you're going to have such a sophisticated website, you definitely have to have the resource. It can't be badly executed. So I think, yes, it's a reality that maybe people are engaging with art in different ways, but it might not be realistic for a small gallery to develop such a sophisticated website. And I don't think half measures really work, because then it needs to be really user-friendly and sort of really perfectly executed. So it's a challenge, I think, for most galleries.
And
well, talking about the cost point of view, I guess, as Maria was pointing to, there are social media channels which are available free at the moment, which is pretty extraordinary if you want to build your presence on the internet. So there are tools you can do that, and they are free currently. That may change, but currently those are offered free. So using them, I think, is a very cost-effective way of sitting alongside your website and getting the message across. But as Maria was saying, I think it obviously needs to be consistent between the different channels that you're using. And yes, in an ideal world, of course, I currently am moving my website to a mobile, smartphone-enabled website that can be read anywhere by anyone on their phone. And yes, that is the ideal solution. But as Maria said, it might not be cost-effective, whereas these social media channels are. But as she said, this is a very important point that I would suggest everyone takes away from today, is that there is no point having these channels if you are not keeping them regularly updated with interesting content. It's actually worse to have channels out there that are not being updated because they suggest that you're not interested in the audience that you're trying to reach. So that is, and that requires quite a commitment in time and effort from everybody involved. So setting a communications plan for your social media is perhaps the best way to get good results, so that rather than leaving weeks of non-activity, that you know that there is some activity going on in the gallery that you are going to be communicating on ideally a daily basis, but it's certainly at least a weekly basis to keep that audience engagement and that conversation going.
The last question on branding, then we'll go to the second part. Are there, when somebody comes to you, are there any kind of key performance indicator that you can establish about branding? How do you? I come to you and I say, okay, I want to have to develop my brand, and how can I judge that you succeed or not in this kind of mission? What's your response to somebody who asking you such a stupid question?
I think it's very difficult to measure brand recognition. I mean, it's difficult to do in figures. But for example, one of the exercises we like to do is, if a potential client comes to us and says, I sort of feel that I'm not getting my message across, and I don't think we're really recognized for what we stand for, what we are seeking to stand for. We have a lot of fun in doing and carrying out a kind of perception audit, and it's really not very scientific, but we take a cross-section of, say, the target groups, and it might be sort of a collector, a museum director, people from the media, and ask them a couple of questions about how they perceive this particular organization. And in a way, they're much more likely to give us that candid feedback than if the organization is going to these people and asking them directly. And we sort of analyze that feedback and reflect it back to them and see how it compares with how that organization thinks, or what that organization thinks its brand is or what it stands for. And sometimes there is a big disparity, so there's a lot of work to be done, and maybe it's a matter of program or structural changes, or maybe it's all there, but it's just not really being communicated.
And you, Calum?
Well, that's industry best practice, so yeah, I would agree with her.
So now I would like to move to the second question. Once you have something to say, what kind of tool you're going to use to say them? And especially, I think that tools have changed a lot. First, for a long time, it was offline. It was, the traditional. It was advertising. It was events. It's still very important, especially events are very important for a gallery. But now there are other tools, and especially the digital world has brought a certain number of other tools. So, for you, what is today the importance of the offline and the online in terms of trying to communicate? What is for you, if you have to say a balance between what is the most effective tools? What is for you the one that you will advise?
I mean, I think you said it before. It is both are important, and both need to be consistent and work together. But for example, if we work with a newspaper or magazine on an article about an exhibition or a gallery, it's no longer enough just to see that in print, because as the old saying goes, it's tomorrow's newspaper, tomorrow's fish and chip paper wrappings. And so the idea is that is now on the internet now, that article, and then it's a case of maximizing that presence online. So it's asking the online platform that the newspaper has to have a link through to the gallery's website. It's making sure that that's then put out through social media, and they do that themselves through having sort of links to Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. And so, for example, we worked on a piece with Ai Weiwei at the weekend that Jonathan Jones, who's a British art critic, wrote about Ai Weiwei's recent exhibition, and did a very nice review. And that was liked 3,000 times on Facebook straight away just through that article. So for me, it's a symbiotic relationship now. It's, yes, it's wonderful to have things in the real world, and as I was saying earlier, it's the business card. It's Ed's sort of pioneering pop-up exhibitions that change the debate and draw attention and say different things. But that all needs to dovetail very closely with the internet, which gives you a global audience 24/7 and allows you to tell your own story largely through self-publishing. There's so many self-publishing channels, but it's making the two work together. But yeah, they're both very, very important, of course.
And I think it's sort of key also to understand that there's a huge opportunity, because there are all these, to some extent, free resources out there that you can use to get your message across and reach some of those audiences. And the sort of beauty of some of these social networking sites is that you can gauge the response to some of your programming or some of your exhibitions or some of your initiatives, because people, are empowered to have an opinion sort of quite immediately. So, in a way, although there's, you can't measure it precisely, you can get that direct feedback and see the impact that you're having. And I think it's what I see a lot of institutions using their sites, be it Facebook or Twitter, it very easily is reduced to sort of a promotional channel. You just kind of tweet out content about yourself. And I think it's worth sort of spending some time on things like Twitter, and then you'll see that actually what is happening on these sites is that there's all these conversations taking place. There's a lot of things which people care very deeply about and are talking about. And maybe you should also think about, from your vantage point as a gallerist, as someone who has a very close relationship to artists, maybe you have something interesting to contribute to some of the debates, and it's not just about saying, you know, we have an opening tonight, come along, but you know, you do have a very valid voice and stance, and I think it would be very pertinent to join some of these discussions.
You think that all this can be done in-house, or people need PR?
It's a dangerous
companies?
Question. We've run out of business.
Put ourselves out of the job. Yeah.
Would they need PR companies to help them to perhaps to establish the model? But do you think that it can be done inside, in-house? And what would you be your suggestion to do something? How somebody here can use a Facebook page in an effective way?
I think the answer, unfortunately, is probably yes. You can train up the people in-house to manage it, and it's probably quite a cost-effective way of doing it if you have limited resources. But where I think it makes sense working with an agency is if you're struggling to find that kind of identity and seeing, you know, where do I sit within this noisy environment, I think it helps to have someone who's external and who maybe knows the context you sit in and can perhaps carry some, you know, extensive research and help you develop that identity or that core story, because it's quite difficult to do it when you're in it. You know, you just don't have the distance. But if you have someone who helps you really craft that narrative and maybe develops a longer-term strategy, maybe then you're sort of empowered to implement it yourself. And there's a lot of things in terms of day-to-day management that you can probably do with your own team. And it's a sort of perhaps more realistic and cost-effective solution than retaining an agency to manage your you know, social media, for example.
What do you think?
Well, I'm quite keen on the personality-driven social media. So I guess someone like Hans-Ulrich Obrist's Instagram feed is something that I follow and find interesting, and you know, that tells you where he is in the world and what he's liking, and you know, what's going on with him, and that's a pretty good guide to what's going to be at the Serpentine Gallery over the next few years. So, so I think if there is a way for gallery owners to carve out some time in their travels and in their visits to their artist studios and in their getting ready for exhibitions, then I think that's fantastically interesting content that I would want to see, and I imagine many of their potential clients and their artists and, you know, the people around the gallery would find interesting, and helps build that personal story and that, I guess for want of a better word, personal brand that people then relate to and follow and, you know, get excited about. So yes, I think for me, I think it's not something you can, as a gallery owner, necessarily hand over to the most junior member of your staff to just, okay, you're in charge of communications plus answering the phones on the front desk plus, you know, all the dinners plus everything else. I do think if at all possible, there should be someone in the gallery whose half of their job, or as much of their job as possible, is focused on communications, because I think for a gallery, you know, it does various things for the artists, but one of the things the gallery does best for their artists is communicate them to the world, whether that's putting on exhibitions. And if the team internally is not focused on that, and if there's not internal resource going into that, then, you know, there isn't the audience, there isn't the receiver for the artwork to, you know, to exist. So so yes, I think it's definitely something that should be as much as possible in-house, but as Maria said, yeah, it can certainly be done bigger and better and more amplified by an agency.
We'll talk about price in 5 minutes. No, everything has a price or cost, I don't know. Let us say a price. I think what you said is interesting. I think it could be done in-house, but I think it could be also interesting to have a professional helping you to build the how to do it, and then after you do it by yourself. But I think you can really go much quicker and more effective if somebody help you to do it in a way. So it comes to the crucial question. what you think is that a gallery should devote in terms of communication, in terms of budget? You know, it's very interesting because give me the answer, because I'll be very interested. People are devoting a lot of money for fairs and a very, very small amount on communication. Don't you think at a certain time, perhaps I will be very provocative, better to make one less fair and to put this money in communication? And it's coming to my first question. What is for you the budget for a small or mid-sized gallery in terms of communication? A budget which can make you a little bit visible. I don't say that you become the voice, but at least a voice.
Mm. I mean, I guess for me, I would say to any potential client that if you're working on a project or working on growing your business, that you should be looking at spending 10% of your investment in the growth of the business in communications at least. And so I guess that can be, quite a big commitment. But I do think it's essential to be thinking on everything you're doing. How are we communicating that and allocating money to do that? So whether that is participating in an art fair or an exhibition in the gallery or an event, there has to be
10%
communications around it. Whether that's
online and offline, 10%. And then after you have to choose between the balance between online and offline.
Yeah, or you could put all that into advertising, or put it all into PR and media relations. But yeah, that would be my starting point, suggesting to people that shouldn't be less than that.
No, I think that's accurate. I can't speak about budgets. I'm sadly not the CEO of my company, so. But I do think that if you are spending money on programming or taking part in art fairs, you should really think about how you make the most of that investment. And part of that is really to communicate that you are taking part in something, or that you've organized something, because it's not just going to. People aren't just going to find out about it by chance.
So now we're going to move to a very inexpensive tool, word of mouth. And now let's speak about the use of social networks, and especially the word of mouth. First, is it a relevant tool to build today an identity? Second question, how to use them, and especially how to use them when you're a small or mid-sized gallery. Is it today a tool, social networks, trying to build a conversation with people through social networks, through word of mouth? You think that today is an effective way to have not only your voice heard, but also your voice spread to others?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely crucial. Yeah.
It's crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I was saying earlier about getting on Instagram and, sharing what you're up to and the interesting things that happen as part of your daily work, the images of works coming out of the studio, previewing what's going on, what you're going to be showing at an upcoming art fair or an upcoming exhibition. I think it's absolutely vital to get that material out there. And as you say, it's a wonderful free tool currently that, as long as you devote, as I was saying earlier, some decent amount of time to doing it so that people keep getting regular but not bombarded by your communications. There is a danger in doing too much communicating, and I've asked Sylvain to tell me to shut up when I rabbit on too much. But yeah, that is one of the dangers.
Maria.
No, I mean, I would agree with that. I think word of mouth in our sector is still sort of very important, and I do think you're more likely to trust a referral from someone you know than maybe if it's just a chatter online. But it's probably a combination these days. It's as much what is happening on the digital sphere as what a trusted contact tells you. So it's
how can you initiate a word of mouth?
Online?
It's how somebody can initiate something which will become a word of mouth. Is there any secret? Is there any way to to bring people to follow you, what type of message, what type of content you have to put in your mouse.
I mean,
become a word.
At the moment, I would be suggesting Instagram and Twitter are the two main channels I would be recommending to be using regularly to communicate. And I think we are in an image-based industry, so you've got to, and that's the beauty of Instagram, it's all images. So you're putting out interesting images, people are going to get excited about them, like them, and tell their friends about them. But also, I think something that everybody should be thinking about is video as well, because that's where mobile communications is going right now, is video content, and phones are getting much better at showing video, and a lot of channels are now supporting video, and that is a great way to tell a short story about a studio visit or an art fair booth, and it gives really interesting content that people can share. And so I strongly recommend buying a good iPhone 6. I think they've been falling apart recently, so maybe not an iPhone 6, but certainly a good smartphone, not the BlackBerry that I carry around, and use that, because that is a fantastic tool. You can, it's there to take the photographs, make the films. There's an app called Audio Boo where you can record clips, sound clips, and upload that to your Twitter feed or to your website. So it's, these are all ways of telling your story in a fun, engaging, and relatively free way. One of the presentations was talking about time and money. So yes, it is an investment of time, but I think it massively pays off in terms of developing a presence and connecting you to people and getting people talking about you and having hopefully unexpected, fantastic consequences as you reach new audiences around the world that start engaging with you.
I think you raise a sort of important point as well, that I think a lot of these networks are, really lend themselves to you being a bit playful, and they can be sort of very humanizing. Even if you're an institution, you might tweet out a sort of behind-the-scenes shot or something a little bit sort of humorous, and it's good in a way to, make people think that you're sort of more accessible, because the nature of them is quite informal. So I think it can be quite powerful for people feeling closer to your gallery or your organization.
Interesting. Now that we have spoken of the message of can speak, the brand and the tool, let's speak of the people we want to listen to the message and how we can. Do you think that community is becoming something very important today in order to be efficient, to have your message, your voice here? It means that today, if you want to really, more and more people are building communities on the social networks. Do you think that if you want to be efficient and also to increase your business, you have to build a community and to target a community which when you're going to have a conversation, and not just to put something, in the internet where nobody will look at it because it's so, in the internet it's like it's the black hole in a certain way, even if it's not black. What is the importance today of building a relationship with a community?
I mean, I guess, galleries are sitting on one of the greatest community resources already, which is their database of clients and contacts, and, that database is incredible.
But they want to increase it.
Yeah, no, but I would start by saying, are you actually engaging properly with all those people who've already said they are interested in what you do and interested in your artists and interested in buying your work? And so before, for me, there's already that very big community who we know are interested. Are we actually effectively communicating with them? Do we have a plan to how to reach out to them in a regular way? Are we sending a blast to them saying we're now on Instagram, please follow us? You use it, connecting up the fact that you've got these people addresses and email addresses and phones, and getting them to then join your social networks. And then, bam, you've already got potentially, quite a big community already, and then they will then reach out to their friends and engage. Every one of those is probably worth 1 to 50 more people that they will engage with if you're putting out interesting content. So I think for me, look at what some of the amazing resources you've already got in-house, which is, your database.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's a sort of slight risk also of getting distracted by numbers, because it's it's great to see if you do set up a Twitter account or a Facebook page, your numbers of likes growing as well as your followers. But I don't think numbers tell the whole story, and that doesn't necessarily mean you're reaching the right people. So I think you do need to have a really clear understanding of who is it you want to target, and it's not just about having more Twitter followers than any other gallery, because that maybe isn't that useful for you, but making sure you're targeting the right people, and that then you're using those tools in the right way.
And no, it's interesting because I think your voice is much clearer in the community than just on the internet, and especially if you use the word of mouth strategy. This is and so how they can expand the about a part of the data, how they can expand about their own data. They really want to expand their audience, and especially the audience which can also be a customer. What are the best way to do it?
I mean, I work with some great art fairs, so I have to say that art fairs are still, I think, one of the great ways.
We're using communication.
Well, but meeting people is still, for me, the fundamental part. As Maria was saying earlier, what gallerists are best at is personal communication and building trust and sharing their expertise and their passion and meeting new people and then getting their business card and doing it the way that we do in the business in Hong Kong, which everyone gets a business card as soon as they meet, not leaving that person without getting a business card, is a way of building that database and then connecting those people and inviting them, because that's your target audience. It's not like there's a collectors collective on the internet that I'm aware of, where you can say, okay, there's ArtStack. We've talked. That's art lovers. I don't know how many actual collectors are on there, but at an art fair, you're meeting all those potential clients and getting them to connect with you personally, and then with you digitally. I think is a very good way of trying to build that network.
What do you think?
I think I would agree with what Calum said.
At the end, you said something very interesting. You spoke about trust. You spoke about very specific qualities, and it brings us to the galleries, to the people who are here. Don't you think that in terms of having a voice, the best voice for them is to be themselves, is to focus on what you are as a human person, what you're doing to for the artist, meaning you're on the field, to focus on what people want. People art, I think, want to be guided. And don't you think that a voice for galleries is before everything? It's made of body and.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a contradiction, really, isn't it? That you're using technology to tell a personal story and to become more personal and be closer to people. But I think that is the reality, that there is the opportunity to tell a personal, authentic story through social media and digital channels, so long as the reality when people meet you is consistent. I wouldn't suggest creating an avatar online that is a completely different person from you, unless that is, again, your brand strategy to have a disconnect between the two. So, yeah.
I don't think anything is really a substitute for personal relationships, and I think we talked extensively about whether to what extent things like online market platforms or Instagram pose a threat for galleries, and I tend to think that people will always see the value of guidance and good advice, and that is really where the value, I think, of the gallerist lies, and I think people always come back for that, and that's really something that you build through personal relationship and trust, and whether that you then use other channels to sort of enhance your image or amplify it, that's I think that's perfectly valid, but nothing quite replaces the...
No, I agree, and I think also, for me, going to a gallery is about access and experience as well, and I think that's something that obviously you can do in person, but also you can, as I was saying earlier, that's something you can do through your Instagram feed is access to the artist studio or to a nice dinner with you're out with interesting artists XYZ, and it's sharing that kind of that story and those those relationships and that experience.
I don't think that we tend to mix the toolbox with the message. Internet is just a toolbox. What is important is the message, then you use the right tool. And when I was just speaking of the person, of the gallerist, he's the message. But he's not the tool. And I think what is important is first the message, don't you think so? And then after you use the tool. And do you see a difference between a message and a tool?
Well,
and especially a toolbox?
Yeah, it's quite a confusing toolbox we've got going on, but I think there are times when the person, the tool becomes the message. I think it's inevitable because galleries are, individual-led, gallery owner-led businesses, so they're a personal business, and so inevitably that person's personality and interests and relationships and network is going to be the message as well as sometimes the tool. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you sort of, in a way brought us back to the beginning of this discussion, which is I think the process of really arriving at that identity and core story is really the fundamental part. And then there's all kinds of channels you can use to broadcast it, but that needs to be really robust, I think, to begin with. And, we are speaking about a crowded market, but in a way, I think competition is not a bad thing. It sometimes helps that process. If just to speak of an example, if you think of the Armory show in New York, when Frieze arrived, everyone was sort of thinking, well, it's had its day. There were already some problems with it, and here was a sort of newcomer who was doing everything, bigger and better. And I think it forced it to really think, the Armory show, to think long and hard about what wasn't working with the fair. And make some very necessary changes, and that's from making the quality in the modern and the contemporary section more consistent, reducing the number of galleries because it had become really unwieldy, but also think long and hard about what its brand was and what it was doing different to Frieze. And I think it realized that one, New York is big enough to accommodate for two fairs, but two, it really positioned itself as the city's fair because not only has it been going for a long time, but it has that really sort of deep-seated relationship with the local collector base. It has the close ties with all the cultural institutions. So, I think definitely the fair sort of has turned a corner. It had this sort of moment where it sort of was feeling the heat, and I think it's become a better fair because of it. So I think that's probably true on, in a lot of other cases.
So I think before going to the questions, I think that if we can sum up a little bit what we've said. First, do you think that a voice can be heard, even from a small gallery today?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely,
so
indeed. I think
positively you can go out from this meeting and say,
go away and shout.
Okay, I have a small voice, a big voice, but I can hear my voice. So I think this is very important. It means that you have two persons who are really professional. And he said, okay, if you use the right tool in a very persistent way, because the idea is to be very persistent. You built a reputation, you built an awareness, but you can do it. Even you can do it, and not just only big institution. And I think the two persons here agree on the fact that it can be done. So at least you know that you can do it. I think this is a clear message.
Yeah.
And I think that the other thing is about the target. Do you think that we should try a message should be sent everywhere, or they try to really to target the people they want to listen to the message, especially to build communities, because personally I think that the future is about community, where you can have conversation with people, when people will follow you, will trust you, especially for galleries, will trust that you can guide them in this art world, which is becoming a little bit difficult to understand or to decode, because it's so vast and so complicated. You think that that's also very important, is to try to build something very clear in terms of the target.
I think absolutely it's awareness of the wider context you sit in, and a real understanding of who it is you're trying to address. There's no point wasting energy trying to reach everyone, because maybe only some of those audiences are key for you. So I think a focused effort is always better, particularly when you have limited resources.
And the last thing, don't forget there is a difference between the message and the toolbox. So they are open to questions.
My question is about you have hardly mentioned Facebook, which was so in until this year apparently. If I check, we have 2 pages, the fan page and the gallery page, and we have, I think, 1,500 friends and 400 followers. But I wonder if our mix is the usual mix in a gallery, because I think if we remove all the artists that befriended us, if we remove all the friend, family, and fools befriended and maybe curious galleries, I wonder how many of our clients are really following us. I mean, we realized that, and so we changed our communication strategy and started posting content that was more related to the collection thing, like legal stuff or things that we thought could interest more our clients, but nobody defriends us, so they are still following. What do you think is this the usual case, or is the changing the content the right strategy, or you have any?
I mean, I guess I go back to the point I made about your database, and you may just be sending them email blasts at the moment, but have you really kind of gone out to your existing collector database and said, okay, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're doing really great things, follow us, you can and tell them what you're going to be doing. You'll be giving them legal advice. I'm not sure I agree that's a good idea, because you might get into hot water, but you should certainly be, saying we're previewing our next exhibition. We'll be doing a studio visit. We're going to be doing a video tour of XYZ studio, or we're going to be, doing a performance, and we're going to be, or we're going to be doing a talk, and we'll be live tweeting from a talk, or whatever it is. But let them know you're going to be doing this, because otherwise, how are they going to know to follow you? And so I think that would be an important piece of advice I'd suggest for everybody, is that work out how you're going to engage your existing databases in a more meaningful, more personal, more regular fashion, rather than just sending them a private view invite every 8 weeks or whatever it is in the post. It's actually, it can be, those people may really enjoy engaging with you on a daily basis, and be doing that with them rather than all your competitors doing that with them. So that would be my suggestion.
Well, I mean, first of all, I would congratulate you on recognizing that something's not working and trying to amend the strategy, because I think a lot of people just keep doing the same thing and hoping one of these days, all of a sudden their followers will just materialize out of nowhere. So I think that's definitely a positive step. I mean, I would, if it's important for you that these collectors are engaging with you on Facebook, I think you should ask what kind of content they would find engaging on it. And maybe, you could look at other sites. Maybe there's limitations to Facebook that perhaps, other sites would give you more possibilities with. So it's maybe also worth looking at, whether you'd start a Twitter feed, or, explore with other things.
question. Yeah.
Would you talk to us about how to interpret analytics? Because if I look at, what's happening with our website, and I see numbers and countries of where people have been on our site, I look at things having to do with when our exhibitions happen, spikes in numbers or declines in numbers, but I don't know really how to take away information that would be useful. I mean, I had no idea, for example, that somebody we have some number of people looking at us from Russia, and our program is predominantly American. This wouldn't be something I would think about, for example.
Well, I'm not an expert in analytics. I don't know about you, Calum, but I think that, for example, is already an interesting takeaway. If you feel that parts of your program is having, is resonating in certain geographies, and then maybe you want to develop strategies to target them more closely or address them more in your website. I mean, it's very valuable intelligence in a way. I don't think these analytics give you the full picture, and that's part of the reason why we carry out these perception audits, because it's not qualitative, and it's also anonymous. So I think if you're concerned about reaching certain people and certain audience groups, that's not going to be reflective. But it's certainly a useful tool to considerate in your strategy.
Hello, thank you very much for your talk. It's very interesting for me. And I have a question that I'm doing in my construction of the identity of the gallery. And you said is to build a history, you need to appeal to the emotions, to the other side, because sometimes if you give information is very cold, no? Also, the same in press release. I want to know what are your recommendations if we build a history that is more emotional, and also the press release. Thank you.
I mean, I would think it's a question of balance. I think there's room to be playful, and people will feel more engaged, definitely, if they feel that the tone is more informal and to some extent exactly that, playful. At the same time, you want to be informative, and I think it's about sort of striking that balance, and I think others do it well, so it should be possible.
But I guess unless your, as I was saying earlier, unless your brand position is okay, I'm going to be out there and really personal, and it's all about me, and it's all about my experiences, then I think, as Maria was saying, it is a question of balance. You wouldn't want to go too far down the this is my life story, bum 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 bum. No, actually, it would be a bit more balanced with a more serious, informative, professional take on the artist and the type of gallery that you're running.
Hello, you've talked about the importance of branding of the gallery itself. My question is, I do the communication for a contemporary artist. What about the gallery's responsibility in the branding of their artists? Where does that begin and where does it end?
Well, Damien Hirst, I think, has shown us that artists are probably the best PRs and communicators in the world, potentially. So he's kind of, with his team around him, I know, but he has created a mega brand of incredible proportions based on himself defining his brand and going about doing shows and presenting himself and operating within the art world in his own very unique, groundbreaking, exciting way. So I think artists themselves have a huge potential to brand themselves and to present themselves and promote themselves. But as I said earlier, I think galleries have a huge responsibility to be communicating about their artists now. I think that, as other conversations have said, I do think that should be a conversation between the gallery and the artist. I don't think Well, gosh, there'd be a new style. Well, maybe it's not a new style gallery, but I'm not sure I'd suggest that a gallery sits down with every single artist and says, okay, how are we going to make you Damien Hirst? Maybe they do, but how are we going to brand you and package you and sell you? But I do think that galleries can help artists not only in terms of guiding the directions of their work, in terms of what's successful, not successful, giving them advice and feedback and being a sounding board on the actual art they produce, which I know is an important part of being a gallerist, but also I think in terms of helping them work out how they tell their own story and how they present themselves. But as came up, I think yesterday, I think the gallery has to work very closely with the artists because they are potentially a huge, fantastic resource of communications for the gallery in the other way around. And so, making sure that the social media feeds and the artist's website and, that it's all linked up to the gallery and it all tells a coherent story that's not very good if the artist's website is entirely different and tells a completely different story in the way that the gallery tries to present that artist. That then creates, real problems. And I've seen that with some friends who are artists who run their own websites and they just don't fit with the gallery website. So I do think communication is key to it, and you need to sit down with the gallery and talk about it.
Annette?
Thank you very much. I've had the pleasure of working with Calum over the past years. One thing is a comment, the other is a question I have. I think the one comment that I have is that from some of the actually many visits to galleries' websites is that generally I feel that they're very neutral, very factual, very impersonal, and that it's often even hard to find out who is the person behind it and who I can address. And it kind of, for me, reflects some of the things that you experience when you go into galleries and you feel like, well, is anybody there to really welcome me? So I guess that's just a comment suggesting that perhaps being a little bit more personable without it just being about your personal history could be an interesting way to get people to be drawn in and not have the courage to actually get in touch with the gallery. That was one thing. The other thing that I was thinking about is brand association, because right now all of the conversation is circled around how can one small gallery actually make a voice for itself within a larger ocean of voices. And I was wondering if you, in your consultancy to gallerists, ever breached the whole question of brand association amongst galleries?
Are you talking about sort of gallery associations?
No, not gallery associations. In a way, I feel that improving a brand or making a brand stronger is often about associating yourself. And I'm sure galleries, that's what you do. You associate yourself with artists, you associate yourself with the collectors who collect with you, you associate yourself with the art fairs you participate in. But could there be a potential in associations, making those clear that there are collaborations between galleries instead of trying to fight alone? Kind of using an echo chamber of like, we are, or I collaborate with this and this gallery, and that makes us actually a stronger entity.
I mean, I talked to a nice lady over there about this over lunch today, and we were talking about taking her gallery to another country and doing a pop-up show and working together with a local gallery on that, and that would be a very effective solution. I guess in art fairs we see a number of galleries coming together, so Victoria Miro and Ota did a very successful presentation at Art Basel in Hong Kong of Kusama last year. So I think it's a fantastically relevant and interesting way of working together, collaborating, building audiences, telling a different but potentially very interesting story about how the brand relates to other places. So yeah, I definitely agree.
What is your opinion, Maria?
I mean, I think that's definitely true, and maybe it's not limited to associating with other galleries. Maybe it's the spectrum is wider, and you can also think about partnering up with public institutions or public galleries, for example. And I think, particularly if you're emerging, if it's a brand that's already quite established, you can benefit from that sort of credibility. But I do think there's also a risk, particularly if you don't have a very established identity, because you can easily become overshadowed. So I think by all means it's something which can be very beneficial, but you need to have a very clearly articulated story or brand if you're going to do that, so that you don't somehow get completely overshadowed by, this big player.
Sorry, just to make a comment on the first part of what Annette said, which was super interesting as a journalist. If I go onto a website, which may be the first contact I have with a gallery, if I can't find that sort of information, being a journalist, I smell a rat. I think, why don't they want to say who they are? So I think it is super important that that first contact you have is very open about who's behind it. It's super important.
It's about be yourself. There's a question down there.
Hello. I Facebooked your key points during your talk, and I have to say, you should be happy. You've started a bit of a firestorm. Other dealers, artists, writers are all getting stuck on the word brand. And I would sort of attribute it to them being naive, or not necessarily, except one of the writers writes for the New York Times. So I think that in the same way that perhaps stable is the wrong word in the art context, we should use roster. If there was any other word other than brand.
Well, identity, yeah. Yeah, it's your identity, I suppose, yeah.
Okay. It's kind of shocking they're all getting completely hooked up on that word.
That's what this was. Here.
Hi, I just wondered, if you had any advice for people if they have bad news. So if you lose a major artist from your gallery, or if you, because then also, as a journalist, we're quite likely to pounce, I'm afraid, on bad news, and what advice you would give to galleries who are perhaps in the headlines when they don't want to be.
Crisis PR.
The Crisis PR has a recognised formula. There's three parts to it, which is concern, action, and perspective. So if you work through the problem, and you need to give some sort of message that is not just entirely doom and gloom. So yes, you acknowledge the problem. You can't run away from the problem. You have to show your concern and face up to the problem. What are you doing about it? What's your action about it? And let's try and put this in perspective. The gallery is still going. We've just taken on 2 new artists. Things aren't all just doom and gloom.
Exactly. The worst possible response, I guess, is no comment. And you'd be surprised the number of people who opt for that. So.
Question here. Sorry. Here. Then I'll close.
Yeah, just 2 comments. My experience from, let's say, mostly the Lower East Side, downtown scene, young artists and that kind of thing, is that the coolest people have the most shittiest website, and that's actually part of their style.
Yep.
For example, Alex Zachary had a very bad one, and that I could observe that. And actually, more and more I observe that one actually does really only mouse to ear, or ear to mouse, and not so much the other way around. So let's say the broadcasting event in those, you kind of don't want it anymore, because there's so much out, and you don't want to have those masses, That's just in the terms of the other. On the other side, speaking for an artist, I think it is horrible when I go on an artist's website and I feel like I'm at the gallery, when they copy the aesthetics of galleries, and when they just try to imitate corporate looks and corporate behavior and corporate identities. I think they should use it as a tool, make fun of it, play with it. I have 10 websites and even more. It's an amazing thing, and I do get a lot of. If I'm allowed to say something, it's not a question, sorry, but
let's go to the question.
I get a lot. No, I mean,
because
okay, then I stop.
I have to take a plane. Art is made of diversity, so I think every artist should do whatever he wants. In terms of
it's a playground. You can have a lot of fun.
If he wants to have a more corporate image, he can do whatever he wants.
Of course, everybody can always do what they want, but I'm just saying.
But what is important,
position.
I think, what is important is the idea of authenticity. I think that's what people are looking for, a part of information. But they are looking to try to see through a website to try to discover who is behind. And especially the big difference between the online platforms and the website of the gallery is there is a human person behind. And if you don't put this human person in front on your website, you become just an online platform. So this is what's very important is you are different, but at least show it in a different way and really make people feel that you are different. But I'm not speaker.
But it's also a platform to make art. That's the only thing I wanted to say.
Okay.
In a way.
Other question?
Yes, I have a short question. Must your brand express your vision of your gallery, and it needs you add to the brand a slogan like the other business does at that moment that express like a feeling you think about?
Well, I think what I would say is that you really need to focus on maybe 4 or 5 key things, because realistically you want people to remember the really important things. So it's dangerous, I think, to try to pack in too much. And the other thing to bear in mind is that brand recognition is not going to happen overnight. So you're going to have to keep doing things, and they're going to have to be consistent with your brand for a long time to create that recognition. So it unfortunately does take time to build that up, but it can happen.
My question is that is it important to build a separate identity or brand for the gallery and for the gallerist itself? I mean, for the director or the owner of the gallery, is it a different approach? And my second question is that do we have to build an identity or a brand for the artworks or for the artist himself or herself?
I think maybe to tackle that first part of the question, in a way it depends on your strategy for the gallery, because it's slightly risky if the identity is too close to that of the gallerist, because if you want it to have longevity, then you pass it on to someone else. Somehow it then loses its identity because it's the gallerist has changed. And I think if you have a longer term vision for your gallery, it's good to create a distinct identity for the gallery, even if it's closely associated with your own.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Alistair?
Hi. I just want to ask one thing that Calum touched on, because you were saying that it's important to be, both of you have been saying it's important to be consistent and to build up the image. And you at one point said you should be putting things on daily. And then I could see a sort of worried look coming over later, that maybe too much information was coming. I mean, as most of us here probably receive quite a lot of information coming, and I agree with everyone else been talking, when it's impersonal, it goes. I just don't look at it. It's gone. So where's the balance between bombarding people with things they're not going to read because you've put out too much, or
yeah, I mean, it's a difficult balance to strike. As Maria was saying earlier, ask your audience what they like. I think that's a good starting point. So we now only try and send out, a maximum of, a couple of press releases a day, rather than having a day where we send out 7 press releases. So that, our audience in the office is mainly journalists, but we don't want them to feel so bombarded. We try and keep it at a pace that people aren't emailing us saying, please take us off your database, and asking people from time to time, are we bombarding you too much? But I guess, after lunch today, I asked my office to send you an email saying, personal from Calum. So I wouldn't normally send you an email, but there was something that we talked about in a collection I wanted you to have a chance to see, and so I would pick and choose. I guess those are from where I'm sitting in terms of my business, that I pick and choose when to communicate with people. But I think those are the personal channels, like your email, your personal email box. I really am not a fan of getting texts on my mobile phone. And the only time that we would consider doing that is around a really, really major event like the Venice Biennale. If we're working on an exhibition that has a private view and everyone's around in Venice, you know they're on the ground, and so texting people to say, you know, private view tonight at British Pavilion or whatever it is, you know, that's kind of the that's kind of when we would use that. But I guess it's using the channels appropriately, whereas something like Instagram or Twitter, which is, you know, there's a bit less personal because it's not clogging up your inbox or your phone. That's kind of, you know, of course it'll clog up your Twitter feed or your Instagram feed, but you know, even there, as I was saying, you know, I'm talking about one Instagram picture a day. You know, it's interesting. Instagram itself does 2 Instagrams a day by the look of it, from having a look at their feed the other day. So yeah, it's coming up with what you think is appropriate, but also discussing it with your audience and making sure that they feel that it's appropriate too.
But slightly strangely on that, I run a Facebook account for my book and for myself personally, and when I do things in batches, I get much higher hit rate, which is almost saying the opposite.
Okay, well that's interesting. Yeah.
But it's interesting. First, just to how you can not be a junk mail, and how can you make the content of your mail being clicked? Are there any tricks, any ways to do it? Do you have any advice to give to people?
Well, I mean, for me, I always try and put myself in the chair of the receiver and said, if I don't want to get this email or this, you know, this communication, why am I sending it? You know, is it to the point? Is it all proofread? Is in the subject header, does it say, you know, this is going on in London or Prague or New York? So, you know, everyone who's getting it who's not in New York isn't going to go, oh, I really want to go to that show, but, oh, actually, no, it's in London, so maybe I can't go. So it's, you know, it's thinking through, okay, it's basic communications. How can I very effectively and clearly and succinctly, unlike me rabbiting on again, get across that message? So, yeah.
I think it's you know, about knowing your audience and being relevant and knowing what they're likely to be interested in, but also about consistency. I mean, do only communicate when you have something relevant and interesting. But if people don't hear from you for a very long time, then they will also forget about you. So I think you also need to be mindful that the sort of frequency needs to be consistent.
Okay, I think we have reached the end of the communication.
Well, the communication is now going on online over there with her.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
We didn't talk about blogs at all, and the blogs associated to the galleries. I mean, a gallery's blog, and to maybe include these inside the website of the gallery, and also like creating more content for the gallery with a blog.
I think it's potentially a great tool, but again, you know, it's you know, your website should be flagging up your social media feeds. It should be flagging up what's going on, your news. You know, and a blog is potentially a great way to tell your news in a more chatty, self-published, sort of journalistic way. So, yes, if done regularly, but again, if there's months go by without a blog post going up, and some of our competitor agencies run blogs on their websites and they don't bother putting any news up for a month at a time or whatever. And you look at that and you go, okay, great, you know, and stop being interested.
Question, Mélanie. Sorry. Pardon,
That's okay. About blog, I do think it's extremely important, moreover when we are talking about social media and how you are proposing a strategy. Well, to be more clear, I think that working with you professionals is essential to build a strategy and to learn, because it's a real job. It's not like a gallerist tomorrow will do it. It's really a real job, and it's not. But many
I've
people
been telling my mum that for years,
business.
but she still doesn't believe me.
It's
No, I
true.
say
It's
that
a real
because
job with a real budget.
a Facebook page. It's not about. It's not like the profile. I mean, you can do many things with Facebook, and you know it, or even Twitter. But anyway, so regarding the blogs, once you give us a strategy and you train us, then I really think that we have to do the things in-house because I am the one having a conversation with my artist and with the audience. And the blogs for me are essential in the way that when you are on social media, many people have blogs, but in the art world, young curators, young artists, blogs are a great channel to reach people.
Yeah.
And when it comes to social media, right now, I always think of people that are younger than me, that will be the actors, the players in few years. So I really think that it's essential not to integrate it in our website, but to really consider them as real actors of that scene.
Yeah, I think blogs, as you say, are crucially important. With even with big institutions, I find it really interesting that Charles Somers-Smith, the CEO of the Royal Academy of Arts in London, Charles has recently discovered the blogosphere at the age of 60, and he is doing a fantastic job. And I get his posts into my inbox every 2 or 3 days, and I read them because he has a fascinating life, and he's out and about, and I'm much more aware of his adventures and his, the artists he's looking at, the institutions he's visiting, the talks he's giving, and it's a real, it's using technology to tell a personal story again. Yeah.
So I think that you can say that you can have a voice, you can have your voice heard, but it needs to be persistent, it needs to be personal, and you don't have to be a great institution to succeed, but just try to use the tool in the right way, and I think you will be very surprised by the results. This is my conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you.